hand is life, and I will cleave. Only you remain.
Episode 20. Only You Remain. Part 5. The Freedom. Final tag. Only you remain. Only you remain. We could not have heard this line at the beginning. I want to start there because I think it is important to be honest about that. If you had come to me at the cold hearth, in the silence of the halls, in the ache of the arms, in the moment I was watching someone else's fire burn while mine stayed cold, and spoken these words over me, I would not have been able to receive them. Not because they weren't true. They were true then. They have always been true. But the envy blinded me to them. The lack blinded me. The comparison that had become the lens through which I saw everything, the measuring, the accounting of what others had and I didn't. The hunger pointed so hard at its object that nothing else fit in the frame. All of it made this line inaccessible. I could not see past what I didn't have to the one who remained in the not having. That is what envy does. It is not just a sin of desire, it is a sin of vision. It narrows the sight until the only thing visible is the gap between what you have and what someone else has. And in that narrowing, in that relentless, exhausting, self-centering focus on the gap, the one who was present the whole time becomes invisible. Not absent, invisible. He was always there. He was always remaining. But we could not see him past the thing we were so desperately reaching for. And so this line, "Only you remain," is not just the end of this song. It is the revelation of what was true from the very beginning that we could not see until we had been through everything between. Think about where we started. The cold hearth, winter calling by name, the fires of everyone else burning while mine stayed dark, the silent halls, the stone cradle, the tears that ran dry, the dreams that ran past like roaring seas and left only thirst, the crack where words should be. And underneath all of it, the question that drove everything, that the striving was built around, that the envy was the visible face of. What's wrong with me? He was there, in the cold, in the silence, in the crack, remaining. We could not see it. The lack was too loud. The comparison was too consuming. The hunger was pointed so hard at its object that the quiet hands holding everything went unnoticed in the noise of the wanting. But he was there. The thread being walked was being woven by hands that never left it. The dark that felt like abandonment was a dark full of presence. The silence that felt like absence was a silence inhabited by the one who was doing something in it that required the silence to do it. Only you remain was true in the wound. We just couldn't see it yet. And then the journey began. The crack formed in the anger. The dangerous prayer was prayed. Search me, God. Lay it bare. The light turned around, and the interior was examined, and the shame surfaced, and the lies came loose, and the pride gave way. The dark became a friend, not because it stopped being dark, but because the quiet hands in it became real. The grace stripped away what was false, and the stripping hurt, and the shame was on display, and the fire burned things we had been holding for so long they felt structural. He was there, in the examining, in the shame, in the stripping, remaining. The sovereignty opened up. The recognition that the hand deciding what hearts receive was a father's hand. That the thread was being woven by someone who saw the whole cloth. That the worth in what was kept was not about making the lack bearable, but about seeing him more clearly. Because what God withholds tells you something about his character that the giving never could. That the story was never primarily about us. God is the main character, even in ours. He was there, in the keeping, in the withholding, in the worth of what he didn't give, remaining. The altar came, the forge, the want laid on the stone and submitted to the hammer, the yoke broken off, the yoke we forged from need, that we built ourselves out of the accumulated weight of unanswered hunger that bound us more tightly the longer we carried it. The open hands releasing the past, the kingdom placed first and the hunger placed last, and the discovery, tentative, costly, real, that if all that remained was God, then freedom had arrived. Not the freedom of having everything, the freedom of needing only one. Take all I am, come dwell in me. He was there, in the forge, in the surrender, in the dwelling, remaining. And now we are here, at the end of the song, at the line that the whole journey has been building toward, not as a destination arrived at for the first time, but as a truth revealed as having been present from the very beginning. Only you remain. It was always true. The journey was the slow, painful, fire-tested, grace-built process of having our eyes opened to what was already the case. I want to say something about where this series sits in a larger story, because this is not where the journey began. It began, if you have been with us from the start, in a song called You Chose Us First. And that song carried a foundation that everything since has been built on. The God who seeks us out, who chose us before we chose him, who pursues the heart that is running in the wrong direction with a love that does not wait for the running to stop before it moves toward us. The God who remains not because we have earned his remaining, but because remaining is who he is. He chose us first, and he has remained ever since. Through the wound and the accusation and the dark and the stripping and the shame and the forge, he remained. Not as a passive presence waiting for us to get ourselves together before he engaged, as an active, pursuing, holding, transforming presence, doing something in every state, in the joy and the night and the flame, that was always aimed at this, at the heart that could finally see, through everything the journey stripped away, that only one thing was ever actually there, consistent, unchanging, present in the giving and the taking alike. Only you. Not the relationship I ached for, though he is the source of all real love. Not the recognition I chased, though he knows me more fully than any recognition could. Not the accomplishment that was supposed to answer the question, though he is the answer to every question the accomplishment was reaching toward. Not the family I longed for, not the belonging I searched for, not the dream that kept running. All of these things, real longings, legitimate hungers, things God may yet give or may keep in the wisdom of the hand that decides, all of them are now held differently, with open hands, with the understanding that they are gifts to be received rather than answers to be grasped, that they are signposts, not destinations, that they point to the one who gives them rather than replacing the one who gives them. He remains when they come. He remains when they don't. He remained when the hearth was cold. He remains when the hearth is lit. He remained in the silent halls, and he remains in the halls full of voices. He remained in the dark, and he remains in the light. He remained in the forge, and he remains when the fire has cooled. He remains in the hunger that fades. He remains in the hunger that rises again. He remains in the returning to the altar. He remains in the laying down. He remains in the stripping and the shame and the sovereignty and the surrender. He remained before the journey began, and he will remain when the journey is complete. This is what we could not see from the cold hearth. Not because it wasn't true, because we were looking at everything else. Because the envy had narrowed the sight down to the gap. What they had, what we didn't. What God seemed to be giving others and withholding from us. And in that narrowed sight, the largest, most consistent, most present reality in the entire story was invisible. Only you remain. Say it slowly. Let it land where it is supposed to land. Not as a theological formula, not as a line from a song, as the testimony of a person who has been through something real, through the wound and the turn and the sovereignty and the surrender and the freedom, and found at the end of it and in the middle of it and at the beginning of it that this has always been the truest sentence. He sought us out before we knew we needed to be found. He held us in the dark when we thought we were alone. He worked in the stripping when we thought we were being diminished. He stayed in the forge when we thought the fire was too much. He remained when the joy came and when it went, when the night settled and when it lifted, when the flame burned and when it cooled. Only you remain. It was always true. We can see it now.